We're rolling.
All right, so we're going to start testing different intake lengths. Now what we're going to do to start with is we're going to start with the elbow and the MAF right by the throttle body, because unless you want the intake sticking out the front of the car, you're going to have that regardless. We're going to back up that pole. It made way more than I thought it was going to make, which is interesting. Four different sets of wheels.
How much horsepower the pump takes?
So in this video, we are testing intake length, and we are going to have another video following this up where we test some other variables of the intake, like the air intake temperature and location of the filter. For this video, we are excluding it to simply the length. So for all of these runs, we've kept our oil temperature and our air temperature as close to the same as we could. We are testing this on a bone stock NB1 that's running on the stock computer and everything else. It has an aftermarket exhaust, but otherwise it's stock. First thing we're doing is getting a baseline with the OEM intake. So 100% stock NB1 intake, and we're going to do a poll and see what she puts down. So it's not bad. It's what we'd expect to see. 120 horsepower and 110 foot-pounds of torque. And those come in at the RPMs that we would expect to see them at. So no surprises. It's a healthy engine. All good here. So next, we're going to put in a silicon elbow and move the MAF closer to the throttle body. And we're going to put on an excessively long intake. So this is about 36 inches. And this is way too long. No one would ever do this. So we're going to fire that up and see what it makes. So extra long intake. Nice jump. It picked up 5 horsepower and 2 foot-pounds of torque. And if we look at the graph, it's mostly higher up in the RPM range. You can see that blue line keeps going down around the 3,000, 4,000 RPM range. Not a lot of difference. Then as you stretch it out toward the red line, the stock intake starts to get choked out, and the extra long one gets to move a little bit. So next up, we'll go to the other extreme. Really easy. We just took out all of those pieces of aluminum pipe and went with the super, super short intake. Now, if we look at the graph, basically the same. From the super, super long to the super, super short, we're 0.2 horsepower difference, which is basically 0. There's a tolerance window on all dynos, so that's well within the range of error. And we lost 1.5 foot-pounds of torque, so a little bit less torque. Again, plus or minus 1 foot-pound and plus or minus 1 horsepower. You're splitting hairs at that point. So for all intensive purposes, really, really long and really, really short put out the exact same horsepower numbers. So next we're going to test the middle of the road. So we took out one of the pipes, so we now have about a 22-inch intake length. And we're going to do another poll and see how that comes out. So medium length, lo and behold, it's the exact same numbers again. It makes no difference whatsoever. 110 foot-pounds of torque and 125 horsepower. It's basically identical to the super short intake. And our oil temps and our air intake temps were as close as we could get to the same on both of these pulls. And we did all of these pulls a couple of times, and they produced the same numbers every time we did it. So next we thought, hey, let's take out the elbow. So we pulled out the elbow and we had this thing sticking straight out the front of the motor. And it looks hilarious, but it was fun. Results for this guy in the purple picked up 1 horsepower and 1 foot-pound of torque. So that kind of makes sense. Anything that's a restriction in an elbow in the system is going to be a restriction, is going to suck a little bit of power out of it. Again, it's 1 horsepower. You know, we did do this several times, and it was consistent. It produced 1 horsepower more each time, but we were within the range of potential errors from the machine. So final test, we pulled the air filter off. So we added the elbow back in, went basically to our medium length pipe, but we removed the air filter. And this actually picked up a little bit. We picked up 2 foot-pounds of torque from our previous run and 3 horsepower from our previous run. So up to 128, which is an 8 horsepower gain over the stock system, 7 to 8 horsepower gain. All right, so there's the data. So let's get into a little bit of theory and speculation now. So we controlled as many variables as we could. We kept the oil and the intake temp as close to the same as we could. So those are not variables. And the only thing that changed that we had control over was the length of the intake and what restrictions were put into it, aka the filter. So the data supports the theory that on a stock engine with no ability to control the tune, the length and direction that the air filter goes, the intake system goes, makes no difference to the power output. Any of them were better than stock because the stock system was smaller in diameter and restricted in airflow. And if we were to put a bigger, better cone filter on this, we probably could remove the restriction from the filter. But in terms of the length and direction, it's a packaging opportunity. There's not really a horsepower gain to be had based on there's no mythical length that gains you horsepower. Now, the next question people always ask is, yes, but what if it's hanging over the exhaust header and it's sucking in all that hot air? Isn't that going to zap horsepower? We're going to tackle that in the next video and look at how air intake temp, plenum temp, oil temp, and coolant temp, and several others all impact horsepower. As always, let us know what you think down in the comments, and let us know what other items we should be testing on future videos. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and we'll see you out on the track.